think we briefly discussed some of the basic principles of X-ray yesterday, and we continue from there. How do we get X-ray? Very simple way to understand what are X-rays. X-rays are EM radiation. But when we talk of electromagnetic radiation, there are several forms of electromagnetic radiation. What are different forms of EM radiation? I mean, this is even the TV signal also comes in form of EM radiation. FM band also comes in form of EM radiation. If you use infrared lamp also is EM radiation. So they're all, what is the difference between all those EM radiation? All those differences in terms of frequency. And as the frequency keeps increasing, energy of each photon keeps increasing. One of them is शादा इतना शोर करने जरूरी क्या है? थोड़ा और काम कर. So EM radiation, one is visible light. The visible light, what is visible light? Visible light has particular energy level, which we understand roughly from 2 to 3 electron volts, which is 1 electron volt to 3.2 electron volt. Below this is infrared range, above this ultraviolet range, and much higher than ultraviolet is X-ray, and even higher than X-ray is gamma ray. So we have visible spectrum we have seen in case of Balmer series in hydrogen spectrum. We get a visible light, visible spectrum. And if you have Lyman series will have ultraviolet. And we go to other series less than Balmer, Paschen series or Fund series, bracket series, they're all infrared. So when we talk about X-ray, X-ray also is EM radiation, but this is high energy radiation. How much higher? It is maybe it's more than 1,000 times more energy compared to visible spectrum. So either we can tell in terms of energy level, or we can define in terms of wavelength, or we can define in terms of frequency. All three are similar. So what are X-rays? So these X-rays are high energy EM radiation of wavelength of order of 0.1 nanometer. And how are these X-rays generated? This X-ray also, so energy to this photon is given by high energy electrons. So we generate X-ray. In X-ray generation process, electrons are generated, electrons are accelerated, and those accelerated electrons strike up a metal plate here or any target material, not necessarily metal plate. When electrons strike this target material, energy of electron, part of the energy of electron leads to generation of EM wave. That's what we'll study here. So what is how do we generate X-ray? Typical mechanism what we use is X-ray tube. What are the parts of X-ray tube? I will go through it quickly in this part. First part is filament. So there's a filament here which has to be a conductor. And in case of conductor, free electrons are within the boundary of the filament. They are free within the boundary, they cannot escape. But we can make them escape. 3 methods we know already. There are many more methods. One we have seen in case of photoelectricity, photoelectron. Second method is by heat. So here we liberate free electrons by heating process. How are they heated? They are heated electrically. So this filament is connected to a power source, which is battery. So with battery, current flows. As the current flows, it gets heated up. As it gets heated up, the free electrons acquire kinetic energy in excess of work function, and they escape. So this mechanism is to generate free electrons, and when they are generated, they are low energy electrons. So low energy free electrons are generated from this process. Then we increase the kinetic energy of free electron by accelerating voltage. What is the order of accelerating voltage which is used in X-ray? It is on order of not volts but in kilovolts. This accelerating voltage is nothing but a large battery. Any source of EMF which has a voltage of order of thousands of volts and which can be altered. Okay. So when we use this one, so this will, because this is positive terminal, it will attract this low energy free electrons. They will accelerate, and if it is free space, you should understand here from here to here, they'll get uniformly accelerated because field will be uniform here. So they'll get accelerated here. And thus the first mechanism is generation of free electron. Second is acceleration. What kind of potential? Order of kilovolts. Then we use a target plate here. The target plate should have high melting point, and it's easy to understand why do we use material high melting point. So when highly energized electrons strike this plate, this high energy electron, they hit the target, so they lose their energy. See, they will have collision, and ultimately all these free electrons will get embedded in the target plate. So get embedded means what? They lose their kinetic energy. So this kinetic energy, part of the energy is released in form of EM radiation. We know in case of acceleration of charged particle leads to EM radiation. Partly into this, and remaining part, it collides with the atoms of the plate or atoms of the target material. It transfers energy to atoms of the target plates, which lead to heating of this plate. And since a lot of energy is transferred to atoms here, they get heated up. And unless we take care of, unless if the heating goes on continuously, temperature keep rising, it may melt. To prevent that from happening, we choose a target which has high melting point, and further we take this energy away using cooling water or cooling fluid. Then final base, a high amount of heat is produced, hence cooling liquid is circulated. This whole setup is what is used for generation of X-ray, and this when the X-rays are generated. Then we analyze what are the what is being generated here. So this X-rays are EM radiation, and EM radiation we understand in terms of energy of photon and intensity. Now, two things are there. What is the energy of each photon, and what is the rate at which photons is generated, which affects my intensity. So here, this was further studied in detail by Moseley, and based on his study, he plotted a graph like this. And first part is to understand what does this graph indicate. And this graph, we notice this a continuous kind of thing, and we'll understand these two parts. When we analyze this X-ray, which is generated, so when X-ray which is coming out from here, it is segregated based on wavelength. So suppose this kind of sieve, some of you might have seen a sieve, physical sieve. Physical sieve can separate material based on the size of material. So similar way, we can have some segregation mechanism. We separate X into different wavelengths. So something is like 4 picometer, 3 picometer, 2 picometer, and each one, I'm just giving example. Actually, it can be even smaller than this. And each wavelength, after segregation, we check what is the intensity of each wavelength. So this is 50 picometer has certain intensity. And if we do segregation, we find 60 picometer has certain higher intensity, 70 picometer. So after segregation, if we check what is the intensity contained in each wavelength, the shape of graph comes something like this. So this is experimental observation, and this experimental observation can be also explained in terms of theoretical understanding. So that's a part of our learning today. What we notice here, so we find this graph contains all wavelengths which are more than 40 picometer. It has 41, 42, all wavelengths are present. So there is a particular minimum wavelength less than which no other wavelength is present. That's a fun thing we notice. So there's something called, so there are three things to be understood here in this graph. What are three things to be understood? There's a something called, this is like a continuous curve. This is a continuous curve, there's no break here. Then there's a minimum wavelength here, and we see certain spikes. So there's continuous spectrum, there's a minimum wavelength here, and there are spikes which depend on the target material. So these spikes, where do these spikes come, and what is the wavelength of these spikes? That depends on target material. Hence, we call them as characteristic X-ray. These are characteristic of what? These depend on target material. So what it means, suppose I do not change this voltage here. If I don't change the accelerating voltage, if I only change the target, what will happen? Rest of the curve will remain same. If I change the target, what may happen? The position of these two spikes may shift. Rest all will remain same. If I do so, what does it tell me? The spikes what we see depends on the nature of target material. Rest of the curve depends on other parameters. What are the other parameters? Mainly accelerating potential and the current which is being generated here, rate at which electrons are being emitted. So three things: continuous spectrum, minimum wavelength, and this characteristic wavelength. Three things we need to understand. So let's understand that part here. So what is cutoff wavelength? So below this wavelength, no photons are emitted. Okay. Or other way of saying it, this is the maximum energy any photon carries. So lambda min correspond to maximum energy of photon. And this was we briefly discussed yesterday also. Maximum energy is easy to interpret. The maximum energy of photon will depend on energy of electron. Higher the energy of electron is, if energy of electron which is striking the plate is double, the maximum energy of photon also will become double and wavelength become half. So this is something, okay, this cutoff wavelength. Then we come to continuous X-ray. So continuous X-ray, what we find here, intensities vary gradually with wavelength, forming a continuous smooth curve. So that's how we interpret this curve. As wavelength changes, this wave intensity also changes gradually. We don't see a sudden change. We see sudden change only in these two cases. The rest of it is a continuous spectrum, continuous X-ray. Intensities vary gradually or in a smooth fashion with wavelength forming a continuous smooth curve. Then we finally come to characteristic X-ray. There are certain wavelengths which contain a much higher number of photons. So what we see here, suppose I take this wavelength is roughly what? Suppose this is 76 nanometer. We find corresponding to 76 nanometer wavelength, number of photons are suddenly there's a spike in number of photons which are of wavelength equal to 76 nanometer. And similarly, I see something like 82 nanometer also. There is a why there's a spike. Suddenly, the number of photons emitted corresponding to wavelength is much higher compared to adjacent number of wavelength. So there's sudden spike. It means there are extra photons emitted corresponding to a wavelength. This is spike and this is spike. So we need to understand why are there extra photons emitted corresponding to these two wavelengths. That's what we need to study, and that's what led to Moseley law. So, and we call them as K alpha, K beta. We'll define K alpha and K beta. So let's understand continuous and characteristic X-ray. So kinetic energy of electron emitted by filamental are really low. This is the order of only few electron volts. If accelerating potential is V, then kinetic energy of electron striking the target will be EV. So EV is the energy of electron. Practically all electrons have the same energy almost. Why there will be slight difference? Because the electrons which are emitted here may have slight difference in energy, but we can consider all through the chapter, we consider the energy of electron to be constant, equal to E into accelerating potential. If potential is constant, energy of electron striking the plate is constant. So as electrons enter the target, it undergoes series of collision, which makes sense. And let's see this one. So why do we get this photon? So when electron loses its entire energy and entire energy gets converted into photon energy, we get the maximum energy photon. So maximum energy photon corresponds to 100% conversion of kinetic energy of electron into photon energy. So this is what is the conversion? 100%. What happens if in some collision it loses 50% of energy and 50% energy gets converted into photon? So what will happen in this? The energy of the photon will be half. If energy of photon is half, the wavelength will become double. So if only 50% energy is converted into one particular collision into photon energy, energy of photon will become half, wavelength will become double. If only 10% energy is converted into photon energy, wavelength will become 10 times more. It will have 400 picometer. So we understand. So why do we get this one? We get because 100% conversion. And since the loss of energy, we may vary anything between 0 to 100%. Energy of photon also varies anything between 0 to 100% of kinetic energy of electron. Yes?
Sir, so that graph on the right hand side, it continues, right, sir?
It is continuous, yes. But what happens? The proportion keeps getting small, very small number.
Yes,
So
it doesn't terminate anywhere.
By the way, there's no lambda max. So there's no upper cap on the what is the minimum energy it can have. Maximum energy, there's a cap. So are we saying, can electron lose only 0.001% of energy? Yes, it can lose. That's what lambda max means. So what is the minimum fraction of energy electron can lose? There's no such limit. Does it make sense?
Yes, sir.
Why there's no limit on lambda max? There's no lower cap. What is the minimum fraction of its kinetic energy it can lose in form of photon emission? There's no such cap. Thus this will continue. Finally coming to a stop. So this curve comes because it different fractions of kinetic energy of electron gets converted into photon energy. 100% to 0%. 100% leads to lambda min, and in between several wavelengths coming over to lambda max. And finally coming to stop. So we understand this is something as a continuous spectrum. Now we get lost energy converted to EM radiation as it accelerates goes to 0 to entire energy. So it will vary from 0 to entire energy. And this is one part. But it's not necessary this energy may get transferred only to in form of photon. It may also undergo collision with the nucleus or with the atom itself. It's like a physical collision. Let's see this, we see the two objects colliding, and when two objects collide, if this object is rest or lower energy, it may gain kinetic energy. So major part of energy of electron, a small fraction is transferred in terms of photon energy. Major chunk of kinetic energy of electron is transferred to the atoms of target plate. And if since the major fraction of energy is transferred to target plate, it ends up getting heated up. Yes, Alan?
Sir, in physical collision, where does the heat come from, sir?
In for physical
In collision, where does the heat come from?
heat, okay. Suppose we have Halad, you tell me answer. You answer me. So if in case of any crystal structure, how do you visualize a crystal structure? I think you discussed earlier also, crystal structure, they have a particular spacing, and it behaves as if the different atoms are connected to each other with a spring kind of thing. There's a force of attraction and repulsion, and the state of it. And all do they possess kinetic energy? They possess kinetic energy in form of oscillation. So if something comes and strikes, just imagine if this kind of structure, atoms are there connected by spring. If initially it is at rest, suppose I strike one of the atom with a hammer, what will happen to this? They start oscillating. So energy, if so whenever electron, fast moving electron comes and strikes with the atom here, which is already in state of sub vibration, if energy transfer takes place means vibrational energy increases. And so the energy keep, and temperature is nothing but indication of this kinetic energy. Kinetic energy here, it is not in form of translation energy. Kinetic energy is in form of, no, sorry, here in this particular case, the total energy is a combination of potential energy as well as kinetic energy of oscillation. Higher the kinetic energy, greater the amplitude of oscillation, higher is the temperature. So temperature in case of solid or crystal is an indication of total energy of electron. As the temperature increases, the total energy of atoms also keep on increasing, which is a combination of potential energy and kinetic energy. Do we study anywhere this thing in detail? We don't study in detail, but basic understanding is okay, adequate. What is the difference between this solid structure and gas? This is something, this what happens in case of a solid. The solid interatomic spacing is almost fixed. And that's why there's a force of attraction and repulsion, and there's a potential energy. Only difference between this and gas is that here, in case of gas, atoms are far apart, hence potential energy and force of attraction repulsion is negligible, and hence the potential energy is negligible. Okay, so we are just little diversion from here. So it is transferred to target, and as the energy gets transferred, it is the total energy increases. Total energy is a combination of potential energy and kinetic energy, similar to an oscillating particle connected to spring. And state is oscillating with energy increases, and when it increases, amplitude actually increases. Omega may not change much, which is okay, not so relevant, and temperature also goes up. and this temperature we keep cooling using cooling water. So this part, okay. So we have, so far what we have done so far, our aim is, we have understood what part we understood. This kinetic energy of electron, major share is transferred to the target plate. A smaller fraction is transferred to photon. Some cases, few electrons transfer they lose entire energy and emit photons. When they lose 100% of the energy in form of photon emission, we get lambda minimum. Other cases, they lose energy which is varying from 100% to close to 0%. Close to 0% will lead to very large wavelength. Rest of them, slowly the wavelengths will be like this. So that's the shape. Some cases, now this is one. So we talk of photon emission. Now, this is also possible, as we've seen earlier. Collision can take place with orbiting electrons also. And this is the one which leads to these spikes. That's what you need to understand. Where does it come from? Collision is not with the nucleus, collision with the orbiting electron. So here, this fast moving electron come and strike the orbiting electron of the target material. And when it strikes target, when this collision takes place, it may knock off inner orbit electron. So basically, to knock off inner orbit electron, what has to happen? It has to transfer energy greater than or equal to ionization energy of the inner orbit electron. What is necessary condition for knocking off inner orbit electron? What is the necessary condition for knocking off inner orbit electron, Kartikeya? What is the condition for knocking off inner orbit electron? You understand that?
Energy should be equal to or greater than ionization energy
Of inner orbit electron. And we have seen in case of hydrogen, closer it is to nucleus, higher is the ionization energy. That's why inner orbit electron will have even more energy. Are we clear on this part? So that's it. So now we move to that is something. Okay. So energy of photon created. So we have seen energy of photon created varies from where to 0 to EV. EV is when 100% energy gets converted into photon energy, and close to 0 and 0%, close to 0% in form of photon energy. And that is instantaneous spectrum. So no photon emitted can have energy greater than EV. So lambda min is equal to what? Lambda min is this expression. Corresponding to this energy level, we calculate that's lambda hc by E. So this expression gives you minimum wavelength. Yes?
Sir, so in the graph shown here, so like the wavelength of 80 picometers, that is able to knock off the inner orbit electron, right, sir?
No. See, this has already converted into photon. Basically, see, this basically, okay. Is this electron energy? Which form this energy is in?
This is
Here
photon
we are
energy.
talking about, we are not talking about knocking of electron here right now. Right now we are talking about, okay, I mentioned that one. Right now we are talking about energy of photon created. How is this photon created? When entire energy of electron is converted into photon, not by knocking of electron. Knocking of electron will come here. Okay. So this is how it is created when entire energy is converted in form of photon energy. Okay. Yes.
Sir, is there a reason you're talking only about inner orbital electrons?
Well, so okay, because when inner orbit electron are more useful, your question is valid. It may knock off other electrons also, and we'll come to reason. Let's finish this a little bit more. You'll understand why inner orbits are more important here. Only thing is easy to understand. Ahlad, are you clear about this part? To knock off inner orbit electron, it will need more energy.
Yeah.
So we have seen in case that we can understand even from Bohr's model, when electrons are nearer to, it has higher potential energy. It's nearer to the charge, nucleus charge. So inner orbit electron requires greater amount of transfer of energy to be knocked off. And we'll come to why are we talking. So why are we talking to inner orbit more? So what if the target material is changed, keeping rest of the things same? As I'm already mentioned, if I change only the target material, and if the experiment is repeated, only these two position of these two spikes will change. Rest will remain same. So these two spikes are property or this are function or dependent on the target material. And thus we'll see, and rest part, next slide onward, that's our aim. So only we have given some name. We'll define what is K alpha and K beta is. Only these two will change. So continuous X-ray is independent of material of target. And these two are characteristic of material. That's why I call continuous X-ray and characteristic X-ray. We define
Sir,
into two categories. Yes.
sir, will the height of the spike also change when the target material is changed?
The height of a spike actually will not deal much. We don't bother much about height of the spike. We only see this is significant. It's quite noticeable. And so we'll come to that part also. Let's just see that. So what will happen if the current is increased here? See, keeping everything same. If I only use current, if more number of electrons are emitted, what change will take place in the spectrum? Can anyone think of what has changed? Only the current has, only the number of free electrons, rate at which free electrons are emitted here has changed. Accelerating potential has not changed. Target has not changed. What will change in this graph? Since target has not changed, these two will not change. But now number of electrons, suppose I make the rate at which electrons get emitted become double. So accordingly, what will happen? Every corresponding photon also, number of photons getting emitted also will become double. So intensity will become double. So if I change only the current in the filament, rate of emission of thermionic electron, if that increases, everywhere intensity will increase almost by the constant proportion. So if rate at which thermionic electrons are emitted is doubled, every corresponding photon, whatever photons were getting emitted with this energy, those number of photons also will become double. Whole curve will get shifted. Y coordinate will become twice. Ordinate will become twice. That's what will happen if intensity curve shifts without any change in the shape or lambda min. Now coming to what is characteristic X-ray. Characteristic X-ray, just think of it. This is how the neutral atom is, and this is the what you call K shell, L, and M. And here we see there are two electrons. We are not talking about something like hydrogen atom. We are talking about little large atoms here. So this is something in the neutral state. And let's say if it is ionized atom. If we ionize, this some electron comes, electron beam, it knocks off this electron. To knock off this electron, it must transfer energy equal or greater than ionization energy. So it creates a vacancy. So moment I see this figure, this is neutral atom. I hope all of you see this gap here. It indicates an ionized atom. Okay. And as soon as this vacancy is created, what will happen? See, all electrons tend to occupy lowest energy state. Since both these lowest energy state are filled, then Pauli exclusion principle also. After filling up the lowest energy state, only the next higher energy states are occupied. So moment these vacancies are created, other electrons will try to come and occupy this vacancy. So which electron may move? This either electron can transition from next higher shell. The electron can move from L shell to K shell. It can also move from M shell to K shell. So transition can happen from next higher shell. It can also happen from next to next higher shell, even next to higher shell. But all cases where the transition final destination will be, it is something similar to Lyman series. If vacancy is created in K shell, the transition final destination has to involve K shell. And when it transitions, this is called characteristic X-ray. And so in this figure, what is shown here? Which electron has come and occupied? It has moved from which shell to which shell? Final destination is K. Initial is M. It has transitioned not from next higher shell. It can also happen, it moves from here to here. If it moves from here to here, it is called K alpha. And if we move from next higher level, it is called K beta. Now, can you understand where from the K term comes? What does K term signify? Can somebody figure out? I have written K alpha and K beta. What does K alpha and K beta relate to? K and alpha and K beta relates to which shell, where has the vacancy been created. If K shell vacancy has been created, the transition takes place to final shell being K shell. If the transition involves transitioning of orbiting electron to lowest energy shell, those series are K alpha series. Okay, K series. And K alpha means when the transition is to K shell from next higher shell. So that is L to K shell is K alpha. M to K shell is called K beta. So alpha indicates next higher level, beta indicates 2 level higher, and K indicates which is the destination shell. That's a notation what we use in case of X-ray. So whenever incident electron knocks off K shell orbiting electron, it creates a vacancy in the K shell. A similar thing can happen in any other shell, but we are paying more attention to K shell. Because K shell is easier to understand and perhaps more important also. So vacancy gets created in K shell. Electron from highest energy state transition to fill in the vacancy, and when they transition, they have to emit radiation equivalent to delta E, similar to what we had done in case of atomic structure. So energy of radiation will correspond to energy difference between the two shells. Yes, Bhagshri?
So won't the nucleus exert a force on the incident electron?
No, will the nucleus not?
Exert a force on the incident electron?
See, do we, when we calculate energy of electron, is that energy not because of force exerted by nucleus?
Yes.
It is actually, when we talk about energy, it takes care of energy changes only because of work done by the attractive force exerted by nucleus. So when we calculate energy difference, it is because of interaction force between electron and the nucleus. Okay. So it emits radiation delta E. What is K alpha? When electron in L shell, which is next higher level, transition to K shell vacancy. It is K alpha. What is K beta? When electron in N shell, next to next higher level. So 2 level difference, transition to K shell vacancy. That's K alpha and K beta. So anytime vacancy gets created in innermost shell, it will necessarily lead to emission corresponding to K series. That emission could be K alpha, K beta, K gamma, depending on electron from which shell has transitioned to occupy that vacancy. And depending on that, which will have higher energy. Actually, K alpha will have radiation corresponding to K alpha will have more energy, or K beta will have more energy.
K alpha.
Okay, which will have more energy?
K alpha.
K alpha or okay, anybody else has a different opinion? K alpha will have more energy or K beta will have more energy?
K beta, right? Sir?
It's
K beta will have more energy. You know, it's something similar to in case of hydrogen atom also. So if it transition from 2 to 1, it will have lesser energy. 3 to 1 will have more energy. Is it not? So there's something it will next rise. So K alpha will have less energy. K beta will have more energy. And this energy is dependent only on what? It depends on that particular atom. That's why when you change the target, which K alpha and K beta change or not. If I change the target, does it make sense the K alpha and K beta will change? When we change the target, we are changing Z value. So if I change the target, which is heavier atom, if I increase it, but basically if I change the target to higher value of atomic number, will K alpha, energy of K alpha increase or decrease if Z increases? As Z increases, do we expect this K alpha energy to increase or decrease?
Increase, sir.
Increase. You know, so heavier. That's why K alpha and K beta are function of Z. As Z increases, naturally K alpha has to increase and K beta has to increase, and that we can infer from our understanding of atomic structure, Bohr's model. So it depends on. So basically, K alpha is a function of Z. So if I want to measure Z by measuring K alpha, I can measure the value of Z. See, you think of how do we identify? See, you know, you have seen periodic table. So when we say the nucleus has so many number of protons, do you think somebody goes inside the nucleus and count all the protons? Is that possible? How do you get to know number of protons? Has anyone thought of this? Is that easy thing to do? It's terribly small. The size of nucleus is the order of 10 to the power minus 15 meter, 1 Fermi. And within this, the number of protons. How do I measure number of protons? Or how would any scientist measure number of protons? It's not possible to count. So what we do here, so basically from this model, what we understand here, okay, this K alpha transition is a function of Z. So if I measure K alpha frequency or wavelength, I can measure Z. That's the kind of experiment. That's why K alpha is important. Ahlad, have you understood something now? Ahlad. Sleeping now? Okay. Tejas, have you understood something now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Understood.
Tell me, what have you understood?
Generally, we generally take K alpha because we can get the generally determine the value of Z, sir,
Yes,
experimentally.
K alpha is a function of Z.
Z,
Does
yes.
it make sense? When
Yes,
when you said, if I, in case we have seen in case of hydrogen model of Bohr's model also, what we have seen, if we take first line of Lyman series, first line of Lyman series involves transition from n is equal to 2 to 1.
One, yes.
And then this transition, when that takes place, the energy related to this transition is a function of Z square.
Z square,
So
yes.
if I measure this wavelength corresponding to this transition, I can find out value of Z, or we can find out the atomic number.
Yes.
That's why the K alpha is function of this. And when we saw that one, K alpha, K beta, that was kind of theory which was developed. And this theory makes sense in the light of atomic structure.
Yes.
So that's it. I hope I understand what is K alpha, K beta, and K gamma mean.
Yes.
L alpha. What is L alpha? L alpha, vacancy is created, as you're saying, yes, vacancy not necessarily may create in the innermost orbit. It may also get created in L shell.
Yes.
If created in L shell, it will lead to alpha series of characteristic X-ray. L alpha, L beta, L gamma. I hope you understand what does L stand for, what is alpha, beta, gamma stands for. And this is something little tricky. Let's understand this part also. This is something little different from atomic structure. Now, if I have, this is a neutral atom, and here I have another atom which is ionized atom. Between A and B, which will have more energy? A will have more energy or B will have more energy? How do you get B and M? From A to B, what I need to do to get from A to B? See, to A, I need to give extra energy, which is equivalent to ionization energy for K shell. Then only I get this ionized one. So the ionized atom has more energy compared to neutral atom. How much more energy? So if I have ionized atom which has vacancy in K shell, I denote as EK. What does EK indicate? EK indicates energy of ion having vacancy in which shell? Ion having vacancy in K shell. So what is the energy of this one? It will have energy equal to ionization energy related to knocking off K shell electron. What does EL indicate? Jadip, can you tell me what does EL might mean here?
Yes, sir. It is the energy associated with knocking off an electron from the L shell.
And this energy will be lower. So we see this is how we mark. This is something we understand. E0 is a neutral atom, and these are all rest all are ions, and these ions have vacancy in different shell. If the vacancy is the inner shell, it will have needs higher energies. Energy level is higher. So if once I plot this one, it becomes something, transition becomes similar to what we had in case of atomic structure. So from here to here, this is K and this is L. So when it transition from, this will correspond to, so here what happens when the transition takes from L shell to K shell. If transition takes from L shell to K shell, it still remains an ion. But when initially, when there was vacancy was in the K shell, it was EK ion. When transition, after the transition is completed, the vacancy shifts to L shell. It becomes EL ion. Okay, so the transition from L shell to K shell changes the ion from EK to EL. That is K alpha. So K alpha is the transition from K to L. K beta is transition from K to M. So if I know all these energy levels, we can find out energy associated with each of these transitions. Anvita, have you understood something?
Yes, sir.
Why this has more energy? Have you understood? Any ionized atom will have more energy. It has to receive energy to get ionized. And if ionization takes place in K shell, its energy will be higher. Ionization energy in K shell is higher than L shell. And so if the transition takes place, so transition is what? So you just compare these two. If I compare this one, how would I relate? What is the energy of this ion? This ion energy is Ek. And after the transition has taken place, now this electrons move from here to here. Now, where is the vacancy now? Which shell is the vacancy now? It's not K, this is M shell. So this atom is Ek, this atom is En. Sorry, this ion is Ek energy, this ion is Em energy. And so the transition also, when it transition, so atom, it has, this transition has changed the ion from Ek level to Em level. By what transition? By K beta, this emission. So if you have this level, you can find the K alpha, K beta energy associated with K alpha transition, energy associated with K beta transition. So what is energy associated with K alpha, sorry, L alpha transition? Energy associated with L alpha transition will be equal to EL minus EM. And so on and so forth. Shreya?
Yes, sir.
Have you understood?
Yes, sir.
Dhanshri?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, Vignesh?
So here, what happens to the incident electron, sir? Like once it knocks off the inner orbital.
It goes away. So it will not get embedded in the atom because there's no space for extra electron. It knocks off, its collision takes place, it moves away. And it moves away, it will move away with lesser energy. How much lesser energy? Is decrease in energy has to be greater than E delta K if knocks off K electron. Makes sense or
It's
not?
not like it gets attracted by the nucleus or anything.
No. So not that one. See, that way, what if that was possible? What will happen? Electrons will keep adding. It will keep increasing. That doesn't happen. Otherwise, what will happen? Every atom will keep growing in size. It will keep attracting electron, and it does not, because of the reason also it does not attract. So, are you saying that this is something? See, if that has to happen, see, in case of atoms also, we will not have any conductor because they are free electrons. They don't get and join up basically an atom. Okay, so it doesn't get embedded.
Yes,
And we can think of
Sir,
yes.
sir, will the spikes will be like straight lines or like triangles, sir?
Which one?
In the graph, sir, will the spikes be like a straight line or a triangle?
Actually, okay. See, perhaps those are what. Okay, I'll come to that next figure. I will again point out what will the shape. See, the shape what we draw is just for understanding, and perhaps the shape is not drawn in a very appropriate fashion. I'll come to that one. Okay, I'll answer that question. Just wait for a few minutes. You'll get your answer. Okay. So based on this, see what was done. This is kind of experiment, and as we have seen in many cases, several of these experiments give you better understanding of nature. How does nature work? So these are experiments we have conducted. X-ray generation. X-ray generation. Now we have found different application, but initially X-ray was found. Then they found, okay, this is a kind of spectrum. Then they started analyzing why the spectrum has spikes like this. Then you can understand, okay, the spikes have to have certain reason. And then, so the people do study. So there was one person named Mosley. He studied this spectrum. He studied only K alpha spectrum. Well, he studied different spectrum, but he focused more on K alpha. K alpha was behaving in a very unique fashion. See what he did. He conducted series of experiments to find K alpha for various elements. When we talk about various target material, basically what he did, he kept on varying Z with and keep checking what is the K alpha value. So you get a series of table which will have Z value and K alpha. But when he conducted this experiment, the concept of atomic number was not there. What we had? We had a periodic table. There's something called position number, and position number was based on A value. Okay, so he conducted several experiments where he found K alpha term. K alpha basically, when you look at the intensity is not important. What is important? Wavelength corresponding to alpha or frequency corresponding to K alpha. So what is K alpha frequency? He studied K alpha frequency and position. Are you getting what I'm saying? Which are two things he studied? He studied frequency of K alpha emission for various atoms. And what he found, when he plotted this one, if he plotted root f versus position number graph. This graph indicate root of which frequency is this? What is this frequency here? Kaushik? What frequency is this, Kaushik? Pritam? Kartikeya? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Very audible. Okay.
Yes,
So
sir.
what is the frequency, Jay Bhageshri?
Frequency of
Frequency of what?
the electron.
No, so again, if I go back this figure, see, just like look at this. I think I'll just go back few more figures. See, this is something. See, when we, if I do it for particular atom here, what we find, there's a particular corresponding to this peak here. There's a particular wavelength, and there's a wavelength. There's a corresponding frequency. Which frequency is this? Is frequency of K alpha photon. Are you all getting this one? So this is something, if I do it for one metal, I get some value. If I do it for some other target plate, I'll get different frequency. So this is a frequency he used. He used a frequency of which series? K alpha series. Okay, this is the frequency. And the graph is, what is the graph here? Graph is root of frequency versus position. And it came as a straight line. And whenever we get a relationship, it indicates some natural relationship. So when he plotted, he didn't know why it is coming like this. And that's always when you observe something and then start thinking of what the reason could be. So square root of frequency of K alpha emission for different atoms, and initially it was not defined in terms of Z value, it was defined in terms of position number, A value. Which doesn't matter, later on it led to correction in periodic table. So periodic table construction is essentially based on work done by Moseley and based on this understanding of this graph. So when you plot this graph, you find a straight line. And what does straight line indicate? A straight line indicate must be some fundamental property. See, straight line means what? Delta y by delta x are equal. They say there's some fundamental property which is increasing in regular steps. And what is the property? The property was not the mass number, it was the atomic number. So if I plot this one, so if I find K alpha, from K alpha, since it is a function of atomic number, I can find the value of Z. And this kind of experiment, this observation was used to figure out atomic number of different compounds. Then we see this is something he said, okay, it seems to be varying with atomic number. But why is it varying with atomic number? So that was the next question. And his law was something like this. If you look at the graph, the graph is pointing, something is not passing to origin. It is having some negative intercept. So if we write this equation, and that's the Moseley law, square root of f is equal to some constant into atomic number minus b. So these a and b are two constant. So this is nothing but what we see in the graph can be written in form of mathematical expression. What is this frequency? If I ask again, is this clear? What is the frequency we are talking about? Pranav, what is this frequency? Pranav? Pranav, what is this frequency?
Like
K alpha transition. K alpha transition frequency, if it not become something like this.
Sir?
And yes.
Sir, but this K alpha, it varies as Z square, right? So, but not like
That's what this
linearly as
root
Z.
of. That's where root is coming. We'll come to that part also. Now we come to Bohr's atomic model. See, when he conducted this study, by then Bohr's model was not there. He only got this expression. He plotted this one and he got, and there were some cases he found some particular atoms were not coming in the right place. The reason why they were not coming in the right place was not because he did some error in this experiment. It was not coming in the right place because people did not understand correctly those atoms. So it led to correction in periodic table. Yes, it varies as Z square. We'll come to that part. Energy is proportional to Z square. But energy is equal to what? Energy is proportional to F. So what is the relationship between F and Z? Root of F will be proportional to Z. Does it make sense now?
Yes.
It is the same thing. So when he later on, it was explained, this was, when he formulated this law, not as a law, but basically he wrote, he gave this is equation of a straight line. this experimental result what he obtained. He was smart enough to plot square root of frequency. Had he not plotted, he would have seen a odd curve. He would have seen a parabolic curve. Since he plotted, he spotted, okay, this one is square root of frequency of K alpha emission is having this kind of relationship. So when we take Bohr's atomic model, now this can be explained with the help of Bohr's atomic model. How do you explain in terms of Bohr's atomic model? Just to understand that part, I'll quickly look at this side. Let's look at this. When transition is happening from which K alpha transition? Where is K alpha transition? K alpha transition from here to here. As the K alpha transition is happening, what should the charge we should take here? Should the charge be taken as Z value ZE, or should the charge be taken as Z minus 1E? What should be the effective charge which should be taken in account here? See, there is a ZE positive charge, but there is one single electron also present. And I will just briefly mention, there is no fixed position of electron. So what we assume, since it is moving so fast, it completes number of revolution, completes is mind-boggling. So completes its time period is 1 by billion second. So we assume electron to be equivalent to charge distributed on a spherical shell. So because of presence of this electron, which acts as a screen between transitioning electron and the nucleus, it's like a screen. What is the effective charge? Effective charge is not Z into E. Effective charge is Z minus 1E because of presence of one more electron in this subshell for K alpha transition. So basically, in case when we apply Bohr's model, effective charge for L shell electron making transition. This is only when L shell is making transition. If we have next hard shell, there will be more number of electrons which will come in between. So effective charge for making transition is Z minus 1 into E. Okay. So when we apply, if we see, so again the thought was after Bohr's model was discovered, or he postulated this law, they said, can we apply this law even in case of K alpha transition? When we apply in K alpha transition, what they said, okay, since the effective charge is not Z into E, it has to be replaced with Z minus 1 into E. Sorry, I missed it there. So this is something. And then they applied. And then we see whether the results are matching or not. And it was found that experimental results, were in harmony with Bohr's model prediction. The Bohr's model prediction, when applied to K alpha wavelengths or K alpha frequency, it matched with experimental result. What is this B called? B is called screening factor. The screening factor is 1 for L2 K shell transform. Any other transition, the value of B is complex, we need not know. So if any question comes for any other transition, so it will be subtract by 1 only in case of L2 K transition. And I have shown the figure, so I hope you understand. For any other cases, it's more complex. We don't bother so much. So let's apply Bohr's atomic model. This is a transition. We look at the figure ZE. There's one more electron here. When it's transitioning, it is assumed that it is equivalent to this charge being present, uniformly distributed over the spherical shell. Effective charge becomes Z minus 1E. Okay. So if we apply this formula, can we calculate? So what will be the energy of this transition? This transition is similar to transition from n is equal to 2 to n is equal to 1. Only thing, in place of there we put Z, there we write the atomic number, number of protons in the nucleus. Here number of protons nucleus minus 1 electron. So this should be the energy corresponding to which transition? This should be energy corresponding to K alpha transition, if you apply Bohr's model. And if you apply Bohr's model, this becomes, in terms of electron volts, this becomes equal to as 3 by 4, this expression. This should be the energy. Once we have the energy, we can calculate frequency also. Delta is equal to HF. We can calculate frequency, and we can compare with the experimental results, and they were almost perfectly matching. So that is again indication there's some usefulness. So suppose we have to calculate wavelength. We can write in the wavelength format also. What is wavelength format? Using R form, using Rydberg constant, 1 by lambda is equal to Rydberg constant. If it is in SI unit, lambda in meter, in that case, Rydberg constant can be taken as 10 to the power 7. This expression we can calculate the wavelength. So what we notice here, wavelength is inversely proportional to not the atomic number. It is inversely proportional to atomic number -1 square. Or we can say here, frequency is proportional to z-1 square, or square root of frequency is proportional to z-1. Which have different forms we can write. So delta is equal to HF, we can write this form. So that's a question. So that is understanding of X-ray. And X-ray, why we focus on K alpha. In case of K alpha, I can apply Bohr's model only for K alpha transition. Other transition, Bohr's model becomes more difficult to apply, because other screening factor and how they have to take into account. So K alpha transition is easily verifiable using Bohr's model. That's why we focus more on K alpha. Are there other transitions? Yes, there are other transitions also. Okay. And this is okay. This is basically gist of covers most of the theoretical part. Rest all is application of what we have done so far. So what are 3 points we need to understand in case of X-ray? What does lambda min depends on? Continuous X-ray because of partial loss of energy of electron. And then we have characteristic X-ray. Characteristic X-ray is K series. What is K alpha, K beta series? What is L alpha, L beta series? And what is EK, EL, EME? If these 3 things we understand, this what is K alpha? K alpha is transition from where to where? L alpha is transition from where? L alpha beta is transition from where? And what does EK indicate? EK indicates energy. If I take energy of a neutral atom to be 0, unlike Bohr's model, if I take energy of neutral atom to be 0, then energy of ion having a vacancy of K shell is called EK and EL. So this is K alpha transition and this is K beta transition. That's the kind of. These are things we need to know in case of X-ray. So that is all which is there in X-ray. If you understand this much part, we are okay with X-ray. So as far as the teaching part, that's all we need to know. So I'll okay. So now I'll stop this